Part 1: The Stranded Ones. The merchant ship Quiet Passage was dying. Captain stood on his dark bridge and watched the last emergency lights flicker and fade. Around him, his crew of 12 sat in silence. Some held hands. Others whispered prayers to gods they had not spoken to in years. The air was growing thin and cold. The engine had failed 6 hours ago. A simple malfunction, the kind that happens once in a million flights. But this time, it happened in the worst possible place. They were drifting in empty space, far from any outpost, far from any trade route, far from hope. Had sent the distress signal immediately. He knew it was useless. No ship was close enough to reach them. The nearest station was 12 days away. They had air for maybe 18 hours. The math was simple and cruel. His first officer, a young female named, came to stand beside him. Her blue skin had turned pale gray from the cold and fear. "Captain," she said quietly, "the crew would like to know if you have any final words." Looked at her. He had served with for 15 years. He had watched her grow from a nervous trainee into a skilled officer. Now he would watch her die. "Tell them I am sorry," he said. "Tell them I should have taken the longer route." "No one blames you, Captain." "I blame myself, that is enough." The distress beacon continued its weak pulse into the void. Did not expect anyone to answer. The universe was vast and cold, and did not care about 12 dying on a broken ship. Then the communication panel lit up. Stared at it. For a moment he thought he was imagining things. The lack of oxygen was affecting his mind, but saw it too. Her eyes went wide. "Captain, we are receiving a response." "That is impossible." "It is real. A ship is changing course toward us." Rush to the panel and read the message. It was in the common galactic language, but the ship identifier was unfamiliar. The name was Soul Pioneer. The species designation made him stop breathing entirely. Human. Had heard of humans. Everyone had heard of them. They were a young species, barely a few centuries into space travel. They kept to themselves mostly, trading quietly, causing no trouble. They were considered unremarkable by the great powers of the galaxy. Small, weak, unimportant. And one of their ships was coming to help. The message was simple and direct. "We received your distress signal. We are changing course to assist. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours. Can you survive that long?" Did the calculations again. They had maybe 6 hours of breathable air left. It would be close, very close. He sent his response. "We can survive, thank you." The human ship sent one more message. "Hold on, we are coming." The next 4 hours were the longest of his life. He ordered his crew to stay still, to breathe slowly, to conserve every bit of oxygen they could. Some of them fell asleep. Others simply stared at the walls, waiting. When the Soul Pioneer finally appeared on their damaged sensors, felt something he had not felt in hours. Hope. The human ship was smaller than he expected. It was clearly a cargo vessel, not a rescue ship. It had no special equipment for emergencies, but it came anyway. A voice came through the communication system. It belonged to a human female. "This is Captain Park of the Soul Pioneer. We are preparing to dock with your vessel. Please guide us to your main airlock." Gave the instructions. His voice was weak from the thin air. The docking process took 30 minutes. Every second felt like a year. When the airlock finally opened and fresh air rushed into the quiet passage, fell to his knees and wept. The human crew came aboard quickly. There were only 5 of them. Captain was a small woman with black hair tied back from her face. She moved with calm purpose, directing her people efficiently. "Get the medical supplies," she ordered. "Check each crew member. Start with the ones who are not moving." A human male with gray hair and rough hands approached. "I am," he said, "Chief Engineer. Can you show me your engine room?" Nodded weakly. He led the human through his dying ship. When saw the damaged engine, he let out a low whistle. "Bad luck," he said, but not unfixable. Give me a few hours. You can repair it. I can try. Your parts are different from ours, but engineering is engineering. Problems have solutions. Watched the human work. Talked to himself as he examined the engine, muttering about power converters and fuel lines. He pulled tools from his belt and began cutting and welding, creating adapter pieces out of spare metal. Meanwhile, a human female with gentle hands was treating the crew. Her name was, and she was the ship's medic. She had never treated a before, but she learned quickly. Your blood oxygen is low, she told one of the crew members. Breathe slowly through this mask. Yes, like that, good. Captain supervised everything. When tried to thank her, she simply shook her head. Save your breath, she said. You need it more than I need thanks. 8 hours later, the engine of the quiet passage hummed back to life. It was not a perfect repair. Warned that they should travel slowly and get proper repairs at the next station. But it was enough. They could move. They could survive. Stood with Captain at the airlock as the human crew prepared to leave. You saved our lives, he said. All 12 of us. How can we repay you? Looked uncomfortable. There is nothing to repay. You needed help. We were nearby. We helped. But you lost time. You burned fuel. Your delivery will be late because of us. Yes, agreed. But you are alive. That matters more than a late delivery. Did not understand. In culture, every favor created a debt. Every gift required a gift in return. The universe ran on balance and obligation. At least tell me why, he said. Why did you stop for strangers? Why did you risk your schedule, your cargo, your profit? Why did you help people you had never met and will probably never meet again? Captain thought for a moment. Then she gave a small smile. My grandmother used to say something. She said, if you can help, you should. That is all. We could help, so we did. She shook his hand in the human fashion and returned to her ship. The Soul Pioneer undocked and flew away, continuing its interrupted journey. Watched until the human ship disappeared from his sensors. Then he turned to his crew. Write down everything that happened, he ordered. Every detail, every word. When we reach port, I want to file a full report. What kind of report, Captain? Looked out at the stars where the humans had vanished. A commendation, he said. The highest honor I am allowed to give. He thought that would be the end of the story. A strange encounter with a strange species, a lucky rescue, a small note in the records. He had no idea what he had started. Part 2, The Debt Remembered. 3 years passed like water through open fingers. Captain returned to his normal life. He flew his repaired ship across familiar trade routes, bought and sold goods, visited the same stations he had visited for decades. Sometimes he thought about the human woman who had saved his crew. Sometimes he wondered what had happened to her. But mostly, life moved on. Until the letter arrived. Elder was one of the most powerful in the Trade Council. She was old, nearly 200 cycles, with deep wrinkles on her blue face and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her life managing debts and obligations, contracts and promises. She understood balance better than anyone alive. And she had found something that disturbed her greatly. The letter from Captain had sat in the archives for 3 years, a simple commendation for a human cargo ship. Most officials would have ignored it, but had a habit of reading old files when she could not sleep. On this particular night, she had found report. She read it once, then again, then a third time. The next morning, she called her assistant into her office. Find me everything we have on this species, she said, pointing to the report. Humans, every record, every transaction, every interaction. I want it all on my desk by sunset. Her assistant looked confused but did not question her. By sunset, had a stack of files half as tall as her arm. She read through the night. What she found made her hands shake. The rescue of the quiet passage was not unusual, not for humans. There were dozens of similar reports scattered across the archives. A human freighter had towed a crippled vessel for 6 days, burning through its own fuel reserves, asking for nothing in return. A human medical ship had diverted from its course to treat a plague on a distant colony, treating species they had never even contacted before. A human engineer had spent 3 months on a foreign station, teaching maintenance skills to anyone who wanted to learn, refusing every offer of payment. None of them asked for anything. Many of them seemed uncomfortable when thanked. Set down the files and stared at the wall. In culture, debt was sacred. If someone saved your life, you owed them your life in return. If someone gave you a gift, you gave a gift of equal value. The universe demanded balance. Without it, society would collapse. But these humans operated outside of balance. They gave without expecting return. They helped without creating obligation. They treated kindness as something normal, something expected, something that required no payment. This was either the most noble thing had ever encountered, or the most terrifying. She needed more information. Over the following months, sent investigators across the galaxy. She hired translators to study human languages. She paid scholars to analyze human history and culture. She even sent a trade representative to live among humans for a full year, observing their daily lives. The reports came back slowly, and each one made her more confused. Humans had a concept they called paying it forward. When someone did something kind for them, they did not repay that person directly. Instead, they performed kindness for someone else entirely. The debt was never closed. It simply spread outward like ripples in water. They had another concept called volunteering. This meant working without payment, sometimes for strangers, sometimes for abstract causes. Humans built houses for people they would never meet. They cleaned beaches they would never swim on. They donated blood to save lives of people whose names they would never know. Most disturbing of all, humans seemed to believe that helping others was simply the right thing to do, not because of debt, not because of reward, not because of social pressure. They genuinely believed that kindness was its own purpose. Read the final report from her investigator and sat in silence for a long time. Then she called an emergency session of the Trade Council. The great chamber was full when she arrived. Hundreds sat in their elevated seats, murmuring among themselves. Emergency sessions were rare. No one knew what this was about. Walked to the central platform and activated the display screens. Images of humans appeared, along with charts and records and testimonies. 3 years ago, she began, a human ship called the Soul Pioneer rescued one of our merchant vessels in deep space. 12 lives were saved. The humans asked for nothing in return. They seemed embarrassed by gratitude. They claimed that helping strangers was simply normal. The chamber was silent. I have spent months investigating this species. What I have learned keeps me awake at night. She pressed a button and more images appeared. Stories of human kindness spread across the screens. The towed ship, the plague colony, the teaching engineer, dozens more. This is not a single incident, continued. This is a pattern that defies everything we understand about how civilized species operate. Humans do not track debts. They do not expect repayment. They give freely and constantly with no regard for balance. An elderly raised his hand. Perhaps they are simply stupid, he suggested, too primitive to understand proper social structures. Shook her head. I thought so too at first, but their society functions, their economy works. They have built ships that cross the stars. They are not stupid. They are something else entirely. Then what are they? Paused. She had asked herself this question 1,000 times. She still did not have a good answer. I believe, she said slowly, that humans hold themselves to a standard we did not know existed. They judge themselves against an ideal of kindness that we cannot comprehend, and somehow, impossibly, they think they are falling short. They believe they should be even kinder than they already are. The The chamber erupted in confused whispers, turned to each other, shaking their heads, asking questions no one could answer. Raised her hand for silence. "We have a debt to these humans," she said firmly. "Not just for the quiet passage, but for every act of kindness they have shown our people and others. This debt is real, even if they do not acknowledge it, and do not leave debts unpaid." "How do we repay a species that refuses payment?" someone asked. "That is what we must figure out," replied. "But we will repay them properly, completely, whether they like it or not." The vote was unanimous. The Trade Council would find a way to honor the humans. Returned to her office that night and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were going about their lives, helping strangers, asking for nothing, confused by the very concept of gratitude. She wondered if they had any idea what was coming. She suspected they did not. And for some reason she could not explain, that made her smile. Part 3. The Gifts That Keep Giving. Park was eating breakfast in her small apartment when the doorbell rang. She was not expecting anyone. She lived quietly on Earth Station 12, running cargo routes between planets, saving money for retirement. Her life was simple and she liked it that way. She opened the door and found 6 standing in her hallway. They were dressed in formal robes covered in golden symbols. Their blue skin was painted with ceremonial markings. The one in front, an elderly female with kind eyes, bowed deeply. Captain Park of the human vessel Soul Pioneer. Stared, "Yes, can I help you?" "We are here to help you," they said. "My name is Elder. I represent the Trade Council. 3 years ago you saved 12 of our people. We have come to repay our debt." Breakfast was getting cold. She glanced back at her small table, then at the elaborate delegation blocking her doorway. "I appreciate the thought," she said carefully, "but there is no debt. I did what anyone would do." Smiled. It was a patient smile, the kind adults give to children who do not understand something obvious. "You saved 12 lives. You lost money. You burned fuel. You asked for nothing. In culture, this creates a debt that must be repaid. We have discussed this matter extensively. The council has decided." She held out a small box made of dark wood, took it hesitantly and opened it. Inside was a golden medallion on a silver chain. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. "This is the trade seal of the people," explained. "It grants you unlimited trading rights across all space. No taxes, no fees, no restrictions. Forever. You may pass this seal to your children and they may pass it to their children. The honor belongs to your family for all generations." Nearly dropped the box. "I cannot accept this. This is too much. I just fixed a ship and gave some people air to breathe." "Yes," agreed. "That is exactly what you did, and that is exactly why you deserve this." She would not take the box back. Neither would any of the other. When tried to return it, they simply bowed and backed away, refusing to touch it. "The debt must be paid," said firmly. "This is our way. Please accept our gratitude." They left before could argue further. She stood in her doorway holding a fortune in trade rights, wondering what had just happened to her quiet life. 3 days later, received his own visitors. He was working in his small repair shop on the same station, when a group of arrived with paperwork and holograms and a very nervous translator. "We have built you a workshop," the lead announced. Wiped engine grease from his hands. "I already have a workshop." "Not like this one." They showed him the holograms. His jaw dropped. It was not a workshop. It was an entire orbital platform, manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, living quarters, staff, everything a master engineer could possibly want or need, floating in space around a trading hub. "This is yours," they said, "a gift from the Trade Council. You repaired our ship with your own hands. You created adapter pieces from scrap metal. You worked through the night for strangers. We want you to have the tools to do this for everyone." sat down heavily on a metal crate. He was 53 years old. He had worked with his hands his entire life. He had never owned anything larger than his small shop. "I just fixed an engine," he said weakly. "Anyone could have done it." They shook their heads. "No, anyone could not have. That is precisely the point." They left the paperwork and the access codes and the legal documents. They bowed respectfully and departed. Sat alone in his shop, surrounded by tools he had used for 30 years, holding the keys to an empire he had never asked for. His gift arrived differently. She woke one morning to find her communication device flooded with messages. Confused, she checked the news feeds. Her name was everywhere. The Trade Council had announced the creation of the Center for Cross-Species Emergency Medicine. It was a research hospital, built on a neutral station, funded entirely by money. Its mission was to develop treatments that could save lives across all species boundaries. Its name honored the human medic who had saved 12 with improvised methods and gentle hands. Read the announcement 3 times, then she burst into tears. She had become a medic because she wanted to help people. That was all. She did not want fame. She did not want recognition. She wanted to make sick people healthy and injured people whole. Now her name was attached to something she could never have imagined. A center that would help millions. A legacy that would outlive her by centuries. She called that afternoon. "Did you know about this?" "I had no idea," replied. "They gave me a trade seal, got a space station. What did you get?" "A hospital with my name on it." There was a long silence. "I just wanted to deliver my cargo on time," said finally. "I just wanted a quiet life." "I know," agreed, "so did I." But the galaxy had other plans. Word of the gift spread quickly. The story was too strange to ignore. A human cargo captain had stopped to help strangers, and 3 years later she received unlimited trading rights across an entire species territory. A human engineer had fixed an engine, and now he owned an orbital manufacturing platform. A human medic had treated oxygen deprivation with improvised equipment, and now a research hospital carried her name. Other species started paying attention. The proud warrior merchants who respected only strength and honor reviewed their own records. They found stories of human kindness that they had dismissed as unimportant. A human freighter captained by a quiet woman named had towed a damaged warship for 6 days, burning through her own fuel, refusing all payment. They sent a delegation to find Captain. They presented her with an honor blade, a weapon given only to the greatest warriors. They offered her a permanent seat on their war councils, a privilege reserved for proven battle heroes. Looked at the blade in confusion. "I have never held a weapon in my life," she admitted. "I am not a warrior. I just helped some people who needed help." The delegation exchanged glances. Then, to shock, they knelt before her. "That is exactly what a true warrior does," their leader said. "You have more honor than fighters who have won 1,000 battles. We name you elder of the people. Your words will guide our councils for generations." Tried to refuse, they would not let her. The collective, a vast hive-mind species known for cold logic and perfect calculation, took a different approach. They ran the numbers. They calculated the probability of a species evolving this level of altruism through natural processes. The numbers did not add up. They sent a research team to study humanity, expecting to find the hidden motive, the trick, the secret benefit that explained everything. They found nothing. The humans simply wanted to help. There was no calculation, no long-term strategy, no secret gain. The researchers reported their findings with something that resembled confusion, which was unusual for beings that did not experience emotion. "The data is clear," they concluded. "Humans help others because they believe it is the right thing to do. No other explanation is supported by evidence." The report caused what they called a processing disruption across their entire collective. In human terms, it would be called shock. Across the galaxy, species were waking up to something they had never considered possible. A species that helped without expecting return. A civilization built on kindness rather than calculation. And they were all starting to wonder the same thing. If humans could be this generous without trying, what would happen when the galaxy tried to be generous back? The answer was already unfolding, and no one, least of all the humans, was prepared for what came next. Part 4: The Cascade. Lee had studied alien cultures for 20 years. He had lived among the, learned the war chants of the, and even spent 3 months trying to understand the hive mind logic of the. He thought he understood how the galaxy worked. He was wrong. Sat in his office at New Seoul University Station, surrounded by research files and news reports and interview transcripts. He was trying to write a paper about what was happening across known space. He had titled it The Gratitude Cascade, but he was not sure the title captured the full madness of the situation. It had started with the gifts to Captain and her crew. That alone would have been remarkable enough. But then other species had joined in, and things had spiraled out of control. They had begun offering humans positions of honor in their society. Not just Captain, but dozens of others. Any human who had ever helped or received invitations to war councils, gifts of ceremonial weapons, titles that carried real political power. Most humans had no idea what to do with these honors. They accepted them politely and then went back to their normal jobs, confused but grateful. The collective had declared humans a protected research interest. This meant that resources would be devoted to understanding and supporting human civilization. In practical terms, it meant that ships now patrolled human trade routes, offering assistance to any human vessel that seemed to need it. They asked nothing in return. They simply watched and helped, studying human reactions with scientific curiosity. The Trade Council had expanded its gratitude program. Any human who had ever performed a documented act of kindness toward a received benefits, trade discounts, priority docking, free repairs. The list grew longer every month. Other species, seeing what was happening, began examining their own records. They found stories of human kindness everywhere. A human doctor who had treated sick aliens during a layover. A human pilot who had guided lost ships to safety. A human teacher who had shared knowledge freely with anyone who asked. Each story created new obligations. Each obligation produced new gifts. Each gift inspired more species to search their archives for human kindness. The cascade had begun, and it showed no signs of stopping. Put down his pen and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been working on this paper for 3 months. Every time he thought he understood the pattern, something new happened. Last week, a delegation from the had arrived at Earth Station 12 to present an award to a human maintenance worker named. She had spent 2 hours helping a lost child find his parents 5 years ago. She did not even remember the incident until they showed her the records. They gave her a small fortune in precious metals and a lifetime invitation to any celebration anywhere in the galaxy. Had looked at the gifts with wide eyes and asked if maybe there had been some mistake. There was no mistake. They did not make mistakes about honor. Had interviewed her afterward. "How do you feel about all this attention?" he had asked. Had shrugged uncomfortably. "Confused mostly. I helped a kid who was crying. That is not special. Anyone would do that." But other species would not do that, had pointed out. Not for strangers, not without expectation of reward. Really, had seemed genuinely surprised. That seems sad. Had written that quote in his notebook and circled it 3 times. That seems sad. 4 words that explained everything and nothing. The Galactic Council had finally decided to address what they were calling the human question. This was not a question about whether humans were dangerous. Everyone agreed they were not. The question was how to properly honor a species that seemed constitutionally incapable of accepting honor. Elder had been invited to speak. She had spent more time studying humans than anyone else in the galaxy, and her insights were highly valued. Had obtained a recording of her speech. He had listened to it dozens of times. They do not want our gratitude, had told the council. They find it uncomfortable. Some even find it embarrassing. This is not false modesty. I have studied them extensively. They genuinely believe that helping others is simply normal, expected, the baseline of civilized behavior. The council chambers had fallen silent. Do you understand what this means? Had continued. They hold themselves to standards we did not even know existed. They judge themselves against an ideal we cannot comprehend. And somehow, impossibly, they think they are falling short. They think they should be kinder than they already are. One had asked the obvious question, what do we do with such a species? Had taken a long time to answer. We learn from them, she had finally said. We try to become worthy of their example, and we repay our debts even if they refuse to acknowledge that debts exist. Meanwhile, the humans themselves remained mostly oblivious to the effect they were having. They continued their lives, running cargo routes, repairing ships, healing the sick, teaching the curious. When aliens thanked them, they smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. When aliens gave them gifts, they accepted politely and wondered what all the fuss was about. A journalist had tracked down Captain Park for an interview, had obtained a copy of the transcript. Why did you stop for that ship? The journalist had asked. They needed help, had replied. But you lost money, you risked your ship, you owed them nothing. I know, but my grandmother always said if you can help you should, that is all. The interview had gone viral across 17 species communication networks. The collective had added it to their primary research database. A poet had written an epic about it. The Trade Council had commissioned a memorial statue of grandmother, a woman they had never met, based entirely on that single quote. Had sent a confused message to her family asking why aliens kept sending her grandmother flowers. Finished his paper 3 weeks later. He titled it The Gratitude Cascade, How Human Kindness Transformed Galactic Society. He sent it to every major academic journal in known space. It was rejected by all of them. Not because it was wrong, because it was too unbelievable. One reviewer wrote, the author claims that an entire species evolved to be genuinely altruistic with no expectation of return. This contradicts everything we know about evolutionary biology and social development. The paper reads more like fiction than research. Laughed when he read that response. He wished it were fiction. Fiction would be easier to explain. He sent the paper to a human journal instead. They published it immediately. The editor attached a note. We do not know why this is surprising to anyone. This is just how people should treat each other, isn't it? Save that note. He thought it might be the most important thing any human had ever said. The cascade continued. Trade deals across the galaxy began to skew in human favor, not because humans negotiated well, but because alien merchants refused to take advantage of such noble beings. Human ships received priority assistance at every port. Human travelers were welcomed everywhere with open arms and free accommodations. The humans accepted all of this with confused gratitude and mild embarrassment. They did not understand why everyone was being so nice to them. They just assumed this was how the galaxy worked. In a way, they were right. It was how the galaxy worked now. Because of them. Part 5, The Legacy. 10 years had passed since the rescue of the Quiet Passage. The galaxy was not the same place it had been. Something had shifted in the hearts and minds of 100 different species across 1,000 different worlds. The change was slow at first, then faster, until it became impossible to ignore. Young traders now studied human merchant practices, not for profit strategies but for ethics. They wanted to understand how humans could be so successful while being so generous. The answer they discovered was simple. Humans built trust. When you help people without expecting return, they wanted to help you back. When you treated strangers with kindness, strangers became friends. The math did not make sense on paper, but it worked in real life. Warriors had added a new virtue to their ancient code of honor. They called it mercy, a concept borrowed directly from human languages. For centuries, had measured worth by strength and victory. Now they measured it by how a warrior treated the weak and the defeated. A true fighter, they taught their children, wins battles without destroying enemies. A true hero helps those who cannot fight back. Even the collective had changed. They had always operated on pure logic, calculating costs and benefits with machine precision. But their long study of humanity had introduced something new into their equations. They called it emotional investment in outcomes. In simpler terms, they had learned to care. Ships still patrolled trade routes, but now they did not just observe and analyze. They helped. They intervened. They protected the weak and aided the lost. When asked why, they gave a response that would have been impossible a decade ago. Because it is the right thing to do. The Center for Cross-Species Emergency Medicine had grown into the largest medical research facility in the galaxy. It employed thousands of doctors and scientists from dozens of species. Its treatments had saved millions of lives. Its name had become a symbol of hope across known space. Herself still worked there. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her hands were still gentle and her heart was still kind. She treated patients every day, refusing to let her fame change who she was. "I am just a medic," she told the young students who came to learn from her. "I help people who are hurt. That is all I know how to do." The students wrote down her words like sacred text. They did not understand that she meant them literally. This workshop had become the premier engineering academy in 3 sectors. Students from every species traveled across the galaxy to learn from him. He taught them about engines and fuel systems and power converters. He also taught them about helping others, though he did not realize he was doing it. "When you see a problem, fix it," he told his classes. "Do not ask who owns the problem. Do not ask what you will receive for fixing it. Just fix it. That is what engineers do." His students built ships and stations and tools that helped people across the galaxy. They founded their own workshops and taught their own students. The lessons spread outward like ripples in water, touching lives that would never know about. He was 73 years old now and still worked with his hands every day. When people called him a legend, he shook his head and returned to his machines. Legends were for stories. He was just a man who liked fixing things. Captain Park had retired to a small colony world called Green Harbor. It was a quiet place, far from major trade routes, with clean air and open fields and people who did not ask too many questions. She had tried to escape her fame. She had sold her trade seal, donated the money to charitable causes, and moved as far from civilization as she could manage. She wanted to live simply, the way she had always wanted to live. It did not work. Letters arrived daily from grateful aliens across the galaxy. They thanked her for things she barely remembered doing. They told her stories about how her example had inspired them to help others. They sent gifts she did not want and praise she did not need. She answered every letter, politely asking them to please stop sending gifts. They did not stop. One morning, she found a child sitting on her doorstep. The child was maybe 8 years old, with bright blue skin and wide, curious eyes. "Are you the human who saved my grandfather's ship?" the child asked. Sighed, "That was a long time ago. My mother told me about it. She said you stopped for strangers. She said you asked for nothing. She said you changed everything." "I did not change anything. I just helped some people who needed help." The child tilted her head. "My mother says that is the same thing." Did not have an answer for that. She invited the child inside for breakfast instead. That was the human thing to do. In a great hall on the elder addressed a gathering of young preparing to enter galactic society. She was ancient now, nearly 250 cycles, but her mind was still sharp and her voice was still strong. "Let me tell you about a human woman named Park," she began. The young leaned forward, eager to hear the famous story. "She did nothing special," said. "She stopped to help strangers, she asked for nothing, she expected nothing, and in doing so she changed everything." She paused, letting the words sink in. The humans have a saying. They say, "Do one good deed, and it will come back to you tenfold." They mean it as gentle encouragement to kindness, a nice thought to inspire good behavior. Smiled, her old face creasing with a lifetime of wisdom. They have no idea how true it is. She walked slowly across the stage, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her. Captain saved 12 on a broken ship in empty space. She lost money. She burned fuel. She risked her schedule, and she asked for nothing in return. In response, the galaxy gave her everything: trade rights, honors, fame, wealth beyond counting, not because she asked, not because she planned it, not because she wanted it, but because that is what gratitude does when it encounters genuine goodness. We could not help ourselves. None of us could. When someone shows you kindness without expectation, something changes inside you. You want to repay them. You need to repay them. And when you cannot repay them directly, you repay them by being kind to others. That is the cascade. That is the legacy. That is what one human woman started when she answered a distress signal 10 years ago. Looked out at the young faces, watching her with wonder. So here is my advice to you, children of. When you go out into the galaxy, you will meet humans. They will seem ordinary. They will seem unremarkable. They will not have the strongest ships or the largest armies or the most advanced technology. But they will help you, they always do, without asking why, without expecting return, without keeping count. And when they do not make the mistake of thinking it means nothing. Do not dismiss their kindness as trivial. Do not forget what they have done. Instead, repay them, not because they want you to, they do not. Repay them because it is right, because kindness deserves kindness, because the cascade must continue. Do one good deed for humanity, and brace yourself for the impact of their gratitude. The young sat in silence, absorbing her words. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a quiet colony world called Green Harbor, Park was probably helping someone else. Fixing a broken fence, teaching a neighbor to cook, answering letters from strangers who wanted to thank her for things she barely remembered. She would never understand why the galaxy made such a fuss over simple kindness. She would never need to understand. The understanding belonged to everyone else, to the who had learned to give without counting, to the who had learned to show mercy, to the who had learned to care. The humans had not tried to teach the galaxy anything. They had simply been themselves. They had simply been kind. And the galaxy had responded with everything it had. The cascade continued. The legacy grew. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, distress signals pulsed into the void. Human ships answered them. They always would. That was simply who they were.